building and planning departments, and I want to hear a little bit about their take on their departments at this time. The Builders Association had somewhat of an adversarial mentality a few years back with some of the things that were going on at the building and the planning department, and we feel that we've all turned a new leaf or a new chapter in that area, and we're real happy with the current selections for the building and planning departments and environmental and public works. And we feel that we'd all be better off in this economy if we all could work together and help improve this county in a cooperative way. And so that's the reason for our meeting today. I'm going to introduce and give an opportunity for each of the department heads to give you a little bit of a heads up on where their departments are at this time. And, I want to thank you all for coming. I'd like to introduce you to Jeff White, our Chief Building Official, first off, and give him the opportunity to let us know where the building department is today.
Thanks, Art. Good to see a good turnout. I suppose that if just one of us showed up, it'd be only a quarter of this number of people. So whatever it takes to get a lot of people in, that's good. We're grateful for the Builders Association put this opportunity together for us to see who we are, and we have some new additions that are welcome and very capable in our government center now, and my opportunity to work with them has been absolutely refreshing and enlightening and prosperous. We've been doing very well with our association together. I've been in the building department for going on 24 years, and the interesting thing that I just found out recently was the building department was created in December of 1961, which was almost before your time, Mike, as a contractor.
Right in that next room. No, my old man started in 49.
49, yeah. So anyway,
90.
Yeah, I didn't want to get you too involved here, but so 1961, that's 48 years ago. And I've been there 24 years, so I've seen a lot of changes and a lot of things come and go and evolve and so forth. My credentials and certificates are all through the ICC, the International Code Council, which certifies folks in my line of work. And we are, I continue to have education and opportunities for our inspectors to keep their credit. It takes 45 hours every 3 years to keep your certification credits up, so we've been doing that. The building department right now is managing to cover everything that we need to cover with the reductions we've had. We haven't had anything that we couldn't deal with. We've prioritized, of course. We haven't had too many things that have kept us from functioning effectively. We don't want to sacrifice quantity for quality, so we've been able to, be diligent in trying to perform the service that we are required to do and what we're paid to do. So we have a website that's been infused with all kinds of information, and I encourage you all to look at that. It's got, and any feedback that you have would be very helpful if you're seeing things or aren't seeing the things that you want to see, or if there's anything there that we could enhance. That's what it's there for, is to provide information that we can pass along. The code, as most of you know that are in the business, changed in January 2008. So we have the current code is that code. We also have things that we're faced with the American Disabilities Act, which we will have some interesting legislation that's already in Senate Bill 1608 that requires higher level of staffing for the implementation of the ADA to get it to where I assume that the lawsuits will probably not be having such an impact. So CAS certification specialists are out there. It will be required that we have at least one person on staff by 2010 in a consultant form, we can do it that way, up until 2012, where we would be required to have at least one person certified in our department to handle the ADA plan review and inspections according to the Department of Justice in the state of California. We have some Title 24 changes coming up January of 2010, so be prepared for quite a bit more in the way of primarily in documentation. So those are something that we get periodic changes in. So get together with your consultants and figure out how you can save as much time as you can in your submittals to get their information right for you. We have a working relationship with the other jurisdictions, with other entities and authorities having jurisdictions, such as the water departments. And I'm glad to see some representatives from CCWD here today. We have some a good working relationship with the local fire jurisdictions because we do have a lot in common with what they're trying to regulate as well. A lot of the issues of 4290, we feel that we have a good understanding of that, and we're able to get compliance, and in some ways the state has recognized through a model of our county on where maybe some of the deficiencies were in that law that needed to be addressed further. So that's an ongoing process, and the state Board of Forestry has been very receptive to understanding how local jurisdictions work with those kinds of mandates. The state forestry is also involved in forest permits that need to be taken out with them. So if you're doing any work on your property that's, say, there's a less than 3 acre disturbance of timber or whatever, you need to go to CDF and get that taken care of. It's a state requirement. So particularly up on anywhere, it doesn't even matter to them what size trees you're going to remove for your project. You need to go over there and visit those folks and get them taken care of as well. The three amigos here to my left are we do a lot of cross connection on types of issues that affect us independently or as a group. So we meet every 2 weeks and hash out all kinds of things that we anticipate or might be dealing with, and we want to stay on top of. So our working relationship has been very prosperous. So that's pretty much it. I could go on with other things. There's lots of legislation, but there's lots of things that we're trying to put on our website. We've tossed around the idea of putting a newsletter back out there, but we're kind of running the website first to see if we're getting the complimentary reviews on that for the satisfaction of what we can engage in the public as far as information. So with that, I'll pass it off to Brian Moss.
Brian Moss, I'm the administrator.
That was for me, not for you.
I'm the administrator of environmental management. I wear a couple different hats. I'm the director of environmental health. That department has about 16 different programs we do, including inspecting restaurants like here, overseeing removal and installation of new underground storage tanks and gas stations, and responding to hazardous material incidences and the like. Basically, that is a department where if we're doing our job, you don't know, you need us. Okay? It means that people aren't getting sick, whether it be from, West Nile virus or whether it be from a foodborne illness, that kind of thing. As I said, we're a couple of hats. I'm the director of environmental health and also the administrator of environmental management. And what does that mean for those of you who don't know me? That means that the county, like many counties, are consolidating departments that are somewhat alike or have something that's in common. This was actually done some time ago. I want to say Mike was probably on the board back when this was done originally in 1994. So it's been a while. In that agency, we have the Department of Agriculture and Weights and Measures. We have the Department of, obviously, Environmental Health. We have the Air Pollution Control District, which is a standalone district. And then most recently, the on-site wastewater, the on-site sewage department that used to be under the building department. Needless to say, this definitely keeps us busy. Some of the upcoming things for the agency this year, I would start with on-site wastewater. We've been in a period and a time of redrafting the on-site codes and regulations. I've been working on this for, really, I hate to say it, for about the last year, but I've been working with consultants. Some of the engineers that many of you work with actually have had a lot of input. The realtors have had input on this document. Why is that important? Because we have a document that is severely outdated. It also didn't allow for new technologies that we're looking at today. So as the economy turns back to something positive, obviously our lots that as builders, you go out there and some of the parcels will become more difficult to build on. A lot of the easy parcels are gone. That also includes on-site wastewater systems. What used to be able to be put in the ground in the past isn't necessarily the case today. Also, it has to do with the amount of, it's actually geologically dependent. So if it's really bad soil, bottom line is, will require engineered systems that today are better than they were 20 years ago, better than they were 10 years ago. Our new regulations will be addressing those things and allowing for use of some of those technologies. Right now, there's some technologies we consider experimental, some are just engineered, some of them are standard. But the bottom line is, it's an open communication with the community. We do send out newsletters, trying to keep everybody abreast of what they call Assembly Bill 885, which were the on-site statewide regulations. One size fits all. We all know in this room that's not necessarily the case. It doesn't matter whether it's on-site wastewater or something else. If it was written for the South Coast, it doesn't necessarily apply to Calaveras County. Those regulations are being, they actually are off track right now as proposed. What's going to happen is there will probably come out a 3-tier system of permitting for regulations from the state of California. Suffice it to say, Calaveras County is on the lowest tier as proposed. That's a good thing. That means we don't have water bodies that are impaired necessarily as reported by the state, so we don't put in these alternative systems. The other side of that, and ironically, is Calaveras County is probably one of the leading counties that is looking at alternative systems. So the people this is going to affect is not necessarily Calaveras County so much as we see it. It's going to affect the counties up north that say, if you can't put a standard system in the ground, you're done. We don't do business that way. If the system works, if the science makes sense, we go forward. So that's in a nutshell about on-site wastewater. I think it's going well. We're seeing some people trying to come back through the doors to take out permits, and when they do walk in, I'll go, I'll walk up and say, do you want to take out another permit? We want to see that door open more often. We're also seeing, from an environmental health standpoint, we do the water well program there, water systems as well, but on water wells, it's the same development type. So, actually, the merging of on-site wastewater to environmental management has been a good thing, because one of my inspectors will go out and they may look at where we're going to put a new septic system, but they can also go out and look at where the well's going to go. And they can assure that the two won't meet. All right? That's actually very helpful. The other issue is, if we have a complaint about a failing system, they may take a look at the failing system, they may authorize the installation of a new system, and oh, by the way, are we out of the way of the well? So we've got one person doing multiple tasks on a parcel. That just makes sense, and that's kind of getting the biggest bang for your buck. So we're merging activities the best we can, especially with a depleted staff. Okay, and that's just the economy. We hope that we see that turn around. Regarding air pollution control, that is a program that has been in the county for a number of years. There hasn't been too much change to that program, with the exception of the last several years. We've been able to bring in monies from the state of California called Carl Moyer grant funds. These are diesel retrofit engine monies. What does that mean to you? That means that if you have a dump truck that the engine can't meet current regulations as far as emissions are concerned, we can help you and get you some money to help offset the cost of putting a new engine in your truck. We get $200,000 a year. I should say we, and I do mean the county, gets $200,000 a year. The district allocates that money out to contractors or to the East Bay Muds or whoever happens to apply. We've been very successful at giving that money away, and I know that sounds funny, but really there's a lot of requirements you have to meet. We'll walk you through the process. So we encourage people to take advantage of that program, one of the more successful programs for air pollution. Certainly. Agriculture weights and measures. Within the last 2 years, the local governing body approved a new office and new lab for the Department of Weights and Measures in Agriculture. A huge step in the right direction. Why? Because the board put a health and safety guy in charge of the agency. And when I went up to their barn, I realized that we had an issue with pesticide residuals and the like. We didn't lose any county employees in the meantime, and nobody was, injured in any way. But the bottom line is, we looked at that and said, we really need to get a new lab. A situation presented itself where we were able to not only get a new lab, but new offices within the last couple of years. If you go to the Ag Department, you'll go down here to the Colombo building, right up around the corner. Okay, so they're in there with actually the probation department and a couple other small departments. State-of-the-art weights and measures laboratory. Big plus. For 2 years, we went over to Amador County and used their lab. Now ours is the lab too that people want to use. So there's some really good things happening in the agency, and like I say, from a development standpoint, where we're hoping to get busier, I would second what Jeff talked about as far as the 4 of us meeting bi-weekly. That's been very helpful. Not that we haven't always worked together, and we have, to be honest with you, but it's been very helpful to say, as an example, the regulations I'm working on. Jeff, I want you to take a look at these regulations. I turn to ccba09 and I say, I want you to look at these regulations. I want your input. I want your input if you're an engineer. That helps a lot. Jeff had a few comments. CCWD had a few comments. The engineers had a few comments. But the bottom line is, from an in-house standpoint, there's no surprises. And I think the most important thing is for you, coming from us, is consistency. You want, that's what you should expect, is some sense of consistency from building to environmental management to public works to planning. And that way, people may not always like the answer, but it'll be consistent. It'll be consistent, and you're not bouncing back and forth from one to another. So that's kind of briefly discussing the 4 departments within inside of environmental management. If you ever have any questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you.
I'd like to interrupt our meeting for a second to ask anyone that might be parked out on Main Street if they'd move their vehicles for the Redskins preparing for their homecoming parade. And, next, I'd like to introduce Tom Garcia with Public Works.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon, and thanks for inviting us. Tom Garcia, the Director of Public Works. Been here for about 5 months now. 5 months of bliss. Every day's an adventure. Under Public Works, we have the Roads Department, Integrated Waste, New Development, which works hand in hand with George's department, and the County Surveyor, as well as Transit. Some of the items we've been working on for 5 months been here is to actually balance our budget, keep our expenditures in line with the money that we're getting in. We've been very, very successful in getting funds in for new capital improvement projects, grant funding coming from both stimulus and the state's Prop 1B funds. So there are a lot of projects that the county is putting out for construction using the stimulus funding. It's been a boon both to the county employees and we hope to the contractors in the region that are bidding on these projects. That's the good news. On the bad, that's under the roads department. Now, the bad news under the roads department are roads needs keep increasing, and the available funding keeps going down. And our secure sources with the state turned out not to be so secure. We have ongoing concerns about how reliable the state funding is going to be and how that's going to impact our services in the county. Those items will continue to get flushed out as the fiscal year for the state goes on. But we strive to continue the service that we're providing the county residents and manage the cash flow on our end so that there's no disruption that the public can see. Some of the regulations coming down the pike that are going to possibly impact the development community will be the new stormwater regulations being developed by the Regional Water Quality Control Board, which will probably be both managed by Public Works and by Planning Department as the permanent on-site controls for new developments are implemented. And these aren't just for construction projects. These are permanent on-site controls. When you build something, you have to have this stormwater device or a stormwater management plan or something there for the life of the project. Now that's something that we'll be working on with the regional board as it gets implemented into our permit, and we'll make sure that the county is aware of what's happening, the building industry is aware, so that nobody's taken by surprise. That has been the motto for our department, is no surprises. Hasn't always worked out that way, but that's the motto. There are a couple of things that have been hiccups in the road that we're trying to address. A lot of the developments that have been coming through the system that haven't exactly had consistent applications of county codes and interpretations. We're trying to clean that up amongst the four of us so that to reiterate, there is consistency, that you will hear the same answer from all of us. And again, no surprises. If I'm going to tell you something, the goal is to have everyone else sort of tell you pretty much the same thing. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
And last but not least, I'd like to introduce George White of the Planning Department.
Well, again, I also thank you for having us here today. These are the kind of forums that I think we need to participate in. Like Tom, I've only been here not quite 5 months, as opposed to Brian and Jeff have been here forever. But don't hold that against them. As I reported to the board on Tuesday when I gave my kind of 4.5-month assessment of the department, the planning department is essentially tasked with 2 different areas of work. Those fall into current and advanced planning. On the advanced planning side of the ledger, our main task, and right now pretty much the only task that we're dealing with, is the update of the general plan, which I'm sure everybody is familiar with. We have a consultant under contract who's doing the lion's share of the work, but there's still a lot of residual work that's done by our staff and by me and by others in our department. So that's a very large project for the size of the staff that we have, and that's ongoing. And for the most part, is pretty much on track. There's some exceptions that I mentioned to the board on Tuesday. On the current planning side of the ledger, I inherited a much bigger challenge in many respects. As many of you know, there is a large pending project backlog. When I came here, it was upwards of 200 projects, and to me that was kind of astounding. Coming from a place where we didn't have that sort of backlog, I didn't really understand how that could occur. Since then, I think I figured it out, and I also reported some of that to the board as well. And by the way, the data that I reported to the board, my assessment, and some facts and figures that go along with that, I did give to the various media outlets. So these will be available out there in various forms. But if you are interested, certainly give me a call, and I can provide it to you individually as well. We are making some progress on the pending projects list. I think I reported to the board there's about 165 currently from the height of 200. About 80 of those we feel are ready to be processed. In other words, there's not an obstacle or any sort of impediment, any sort of fatal flaw or statutory problem in moving those forward through the process. The only real impediment is having time on agendas at the Planning Commission and in some cases at the board to actually have these projects heard and go through the proper process. There's about 80 other projects that probably fall into a different category. They may have some statutory problem. They may have an issue with sensitive habitat. They may just be fatally flawed. It could be that they're just not ready to be processed completely. And in other cases, the project proponents may no longer own the property. They may have been taken over by the bank. There's a lot of different scenarios that we're trying to fathom and figure out, and we're making an effort to contact each and every applicant that we have out there to try to figure out exactly what's real and what isn't. So those are kind of my challenges. On top of that, or maybe underlying that, as I reported to the board, what I felt my task was, my main task was, in coming to the department, was to stabilize, develop a kind of consistent and professional environment in the planning department. Right now, we have a core of really good people who I think are dedicated and committed to that effort. We also have some vacancies currently, and we're going to have some probably additional vacancies in the future for a variety of reasons. Some are kind of mutually agreeable departures, some are retirements, some are medically related. But at any rate, there's going to be an opportunity to do some recruitment and hopefully some retention and development of the existing staff as well as the new staff that comes on board. And as far as our relationship, I think the only thing that I can say is reiterate what the other three have said. But I think it's more than us just meeting every 2 weeks on a regular basis. I would say that I interact with these three on a daily basis in most cases. So again, it's not a matter of us waiting 2 weeks and saying, "Oh, what's the problem?" It's a matter of constantly being in communication and making sure that we are getting a consistent answer that people deserve, and that you're not going to go to one department and get a completely different answer than you got at a different department. So again, with that, I guess we'll turn it over for questions and answers.
I'd like to turn it over to questions now. Keep in mind we are a builders association, and the questions should stay on the subject of building and planning and development in this county. And let's try and keep them as brief as possible. But anyone have a question? Step up.
This gentleman here.
Yes, sir.
What's going to be the situation this year on snow plowing?
We're going to be plowing roads. The governor signed the bill that allowed for the reimbursement of the funds that we were going to use to plow them. Unfortunately, they're paying us everything they owed us through October. Then they're going to wait from October to April and then pay us in April. Now, a lot can happen between October and April, like the snow. But from the state side, I think their analyst office came in and said that they're another $2 billion short. So again, that gas tax funding that we were going to be using for the plowing was on the table before. Now that there's going to be another $2 billion hole, we're not entirely sure that the legislature's going to keep their hands off it. So it's going to be an ongoing battle, one that we're fighting with pretty much all of the counties in the state to make sure that the gas tax funds do become actually available in April. But between that time, we have other sources of funding that we can loan ourselves in order to plow the roads.
You wait till April, so you can get to April.
Well, hopefully by April, the plowing needs will go down a little. But yeah, we'll be able to get through the winter.
Okay. Someone over here? Brett?
This is for anybody out there, but what's the status of the legal access issue? It's never been fully resolved.
You want to take that? Well, actually, it's an issue that we all deal with in some way, shape, or form. You're right, there was a committee formed some time ago that actually came up with some recommendations that I think the board did ultimately review, but I don't think ever made an ultimate decision. We have been tasked, and this is mainly Jeff and I, but I think I'm in there. Tom's involved in there as well, right? And Brian, we'll make him involved whether he wants to be or not. Are in the process of actually bringing some recommendations to the board. Jeff, do we have a date?
I believe that Bob Lockman's trying to get that on the November calendar somewhere.
I think it's late November. I'm not sure exactly what date, but if you give us a call, we could probably tell you exactly what date we're scheduling that for.
Are you going to be putting any of those recommendations out ahead of time?
Absolutely. Well, as normal, there'll be a staff report. There'll be attachments to the staff report that indicate what those recommendations are. Yes.
To add on to that real quickly, the committee did meet one more time because the committee for 9 months worked on the legal access issue, and we've we had a lot of, I don't know if any of the survivors of that group are here today, but it was a very interesting time for that length of time, which we're all over the place, just talking about lots of different issues with legal access. Since then, we have given it a little bit of a rest, came back. There are some recommendations that will, I hope that this, my rhythm is right.
You have to keep talking and you'll go away.
But long story short, the committee has reviewed and endorsed in some fashion what is going to be presented to the board of supervisors, hopefully next month.
Piggyback on the same question. What's the chances of there being a workshop where the stakeholders could be involved in contributing to these decisions? I'm thinking of stakeholders being not just builders, but also realtors, Chamber of Commerce, and Taxpayer Association.
As it related to legal access?
Yes.
Before
you go to the board of supervisors.
Well, I would imagine there would be a hearing process that would be proposed.
Is the planning part in charge of that?
That would be something that would be, I would imagine, at the leisure of the board as to whether they would, based on the information they've been given from the committee's review, to see if that would be of interest to the community, which the community would have their opportunity at a hearing process to express that. So,
after your recommendations are already made.
well, our recommendations were looked at as different versions of what we had in the language from, say, worst case scenario to best case scenario, depending on your point of view. So it will go to the board, obviously, for their review to see if they even like what they see as far as they may not like it at all. I don't know, but we have to start with that in mind.
Is this not a title issue?
We've talked about the title issue, the problem with legal access being the words being used is of the opinion, and certainly of the county surveyor, that should be something a judge should make the determination on legal access. So those types of things we're talking about as well. The problem is you know, discretionary or entitlements for permits to qualify to get the permits. So how much indulgence is based on what actually comes out of you know, the board looking at this issue and how they want to deal with it.
Terry?
I had a question for planning. One of the policies of Calaveras County that's unique to all the surrounding counties is that you can't buy ag property and put a barn on it without a permit to put a house on it. Is that something you then directly
Well, actually, you
look
can
at?
buy, if you have ag zone property, you can put a barn on it, because that is a primary use, because it's agriculture. But you're right, there are other zoning districts, really, where we have the stipulation in the code that says you can't have an accessory structure until you have a primary structure.
Yeah,
That is correct.
Is that something you guys are looking at?
That's something I personally would like to look at, yes, because I think it's a very difficult, it's not a policy, it's actually a code requirement. So it's not something that we came up with.
It's in the Calaveras plan.
It's actually in the zoning ordinance. That's correct. So it's not something that's really subject to much interpretation. It's written the way it's written. And I imagine that there was an intent behind that originally. I think it's time to probably revisit that, to be perfectly honest. And my guess is that we'll probably revisit that as part of the implementation of the new general plan. So it's not going to be immediate. I can't promise you that.
Well, I'll tell you guys, I do 3 or 4 metal building plans a
Right.
month, and none in Calaveras County because of that
Right,
requirement.
and we get a lot of these. I mean, I've had that kind of thrust before me almost immediately when I arrived here, and again, I was a bit shocked to find that language existed in the code. I have to believe there probably was a good reason at the time, for that language. I'm not sure exactly what that is, and I haven't done that research, but I think it's time to take a look at that.
I have a question for Brian Moss. I had a subject come up recently on a project I'm involved in, and I was wondering if the county allows a separate gray water system in this county.
That's a great question. That's in the past the answer would have been no.
but there were recent changes to the plumbing code, am I correct?
That's correct, emergency legislation.
And it was emergency legislation, and actually this kind of caught all of us by surprise. But to answer your question, yes, that's something we'll be entertaining now. As a matter of fact, I'm expecting my first application from East Bay Mud for a Comanche project that they're building a new structure down there. And the important thing here is that the standards are a little bit vague. Okay, so I think it's still going to fall to each county on how you implement that. That's one of the issues. The second issue is when they talk about gray water disposal, they're not talking about the old, complaint that we used to get, which is somebody is trying to save their septic system, so they run their washing machine out on the ground. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about subsurface drip systems, something that's at least a couple inches undercover, that kind of thing. So it's not as big of an issue as it might have been. The other proposed part of that legislation was to actually reuse gray water inside of the structure, which is a little scary from a public health standpoint until somebody said, no, you have to meet state standards for water reuse before you could do that. That kind of killed that. But to answer your question, yes, that's something we'll be looking at. I think it fits best under the on-site wastewater program department that we have. And so, like I say, it's something we're all trying to tackle with the state. I saw an application come in from Butte County the other day.
So technically it is something that you would entertain.
Technically it's something that we'd entertain because it is in the law.
Yeah, currently, to kind of pile on to this a little bit, Chapter 16A of the Uniform Plumbing Code, the California Plumbing Code, has adopted this effective as August 4th of 2009 as an emergency legislation, mainly because of the drought complexities of the state. But pursuant to I'll read this part of this so it helps clarify this. Pursuant to the Administrative Procedure Act, HCD has up to 180 days to complete the rulemaking process and make the emergency regulations permanent. A notice of public hearing announcing a 45-day public comment period will be set out by the CBSC, which is the California Building Standards Commission, and posted on the website. And probably sometime in September and October, I think it's like right now in 2009, we might be hearing something as far as permanent legislation on that. So.
And this did come through Housing and Community Development at the state. So that's what it means. That HCD. That's what that stands for.
So what's that mean to you if you have based on the regulations of Chapter 16A modified, or however the final language is, would be presented in as permit as an application and review and all the processes, which would be guidelined through 16A, and then we work closely with Brian's department on how that works, because there is some contradictive elements of that contradict the Federal Clean Water Act. So that's probably why we're haven't heard anything right to the present time on this whole thing. But there's some federal contradiction there that they need to work out.
Anyone else?
We just recently had our second economic summit, and I am curious to know, based on what you learned if you were there, or heard if you weren't there, what's the most positive outcome of that summit that will allow us to get back to building when times get better again?
Well, I was there for part of the summit. I was there in the morning, but in the afternoon, due to some staff problems, we didn't have anybody in the office because of sickness. Essentially, I wasn't there in the afternoon, but I did talk to Trish Kelly, who I think was presenting in the morning a lot of interesting information I think that people haven't seen before. In terms of positive outcomes, at least the way I understand it from Trish, I wasn't there for the whole day, but at least the way I understand it from Trish, she was very impressed with the willingness of the various small groups to work together, come up with some action plans, to actually result in some different kinds of economic activity in the county, not necessarily just have a reliance on one particular industry or the other. I think this diversity concept is something that a lot of people talked about. So if people are embracing that, if people feel that they can move forward either in a small way or a large way towards that goal, I think there may be some positive results at the summit. In addition to that, as you know, the summit was actually the third part of the multitask part of the general plan update. And what's going to come out of the summit, in addition to the action plans, hopefully in another summit eventually, is what's called an economic element of the general plan. So I think there can be some policies established within the general plan for the county that can also foster this sort of thinking, diversity, different kinds of economies and different kinds of businesses in Calaveras County that hadn't been contemplated before.
Along those lines, will the revised general plan be available for public scrutiny before it goes to the Board of Supervisors?
Absolutely. Probably many times.
Terry again?
Yeah, I had a couple questions, but I'll defer to other people. But the quick question to Brian, are you looking at composting toilets or including that? Is that part of the new sewer plan? I'd be remiss if my CCba buddies no one asked that question. Alternative systems.
Well, actually, I would tell you that there's nothing that prohibits, that we're planning on prohibiting. That would fall under our experimental concept, if you will. It would be something that we want a consultant to submit to us to tell us how this thing is going to work and supply the background information. So to answer that question, that is something we look at. It'd be experimental until we determine that yes, indeed, these things work, in which case we can move out of the experimental category and into a normal category. One of the things I did not discuss was on those regulations for on-site wastewater, my proposal is to have the Board of Supervisors adopt them as resolution and not ordinance, and therefore it becomes a living document, because quite honestly, believe it or not, that's a field that continues to expand and change, just pursuant to your question. And so if we adopt it by resolution of the board, we can do an annual update if it's necessary. And that way it's, again, a living document.
Back in the past, in the old days as it were, we used to do what was called a pit system, basically. Right. And then one of the health officers of the day, I forget what year who it was, said we can't use them anymore. For whatever reason, I think somebody put one in the wrong place on the lot and ran into some rock and stuff. They said we can't do it anymore. But it occurs to me that since we're down to some junk lots, this would be the ideal situation where we use way less lot, way less footprint of the system, obviously. And I've repaired lots and lots of systems in my career. I never repaired a pit, ever. They work great. And we could never figure out the logic behind forbidding them. It didn't make sense, other than somebody put one in the wrong place. On a given occasion, and then they were just they're voted.
I think it's a bigger picture than that. This is more of a statewide regulatory issue as far as water codes and health and safety codes. You can't do a direct discharge to waters of the state. Now, sometimes those pits would be in direct discharge, and sometimes they wouldn't, depending on where you're at in the county. The bottom line and the most important thing about the functioning of the septic system is it cleaning up the water before it hits the groundwater? Why is that important? Well, it's obviously important if somebody has a well in the area because they're drinking that water, okay? Again, this is a public health issue, and the reason that would have been prohibited, and that would have been, I'm sure, from the state, not even just the local health officer, is to prevent contamination of drinking water supplies in the groundwater. So you're not going to see pit toilets come back. I can pretty much assure you of that. Now, but the other side of it is, and I discussed this a little bit, is the technology is getting better on systems. In the old days, as an example, we had something called intermittent sand filters. And without getting too far into the technological sewer here, pardon the pun, the intermittent sand filters took up a lot of space, a lot of area. And today we have the textile systems. They essentially do the same job of the intermittent sand filters, and you no longer have a big intermittent sand filter bed. It doesn't exist anymore. It's in a tank. It's under the ground. It doesn't take up a large footprint area. We still have the leach lines and the disposal areas, but even that's getting better because everything is pressure dose, sand trenches, that kind of thing, to make sure that the fluid is being cleaned up as much as possible. So I think that really, overall, the technology getting better is going to end up helping to take up less space as well.
I'm familiar with a system in the valley where they put down a shaft maybe 20 feet, maybe 3-foot diameter, and fill with drain rock, and as a substitute from the typical leach fields that we use up here. And apparently this has been going on for many, many years. And it has an advantage, as previously pointed out, of taking up less space. And I'm just curious if you're aware of that type of system at all.
I would be surprised if the regional board, quite honestly, would allow them to continue to do that. I can't comment on what was done in the past. The problem with the valley is a whole other issue. Up here we're in what we call hard rocks for the most part. Down in the valley you're in unconsolidated materials. And quite honestly, their concern is less about even pit toilets or leach pits, which is what you're describing, and more about the chemicals that are getting into the groundwater from the agricultural use. So they have a bigger problem with ag compounds that kind of make the biological waste material pale in comparison. So I think that's a bigger issue. But I'd be surprised if the water board or the regional board would even sanction such a thing anymore. I'm sure that in the past, yes, that's correct. That's what it's been.
Thank you.
You talked about engineered systems. After the floods in 1955, there was a motel in Wayhawk that lost its sewage system for whatever it was before. They installed a system called Biotank. It was an aerobic system that used a type of flatworm to treat the sewage. And the effluent went into a fish pond with live fish in it. Is there anything like that on the market now?
I haven't seen anything like that. There are some aerobic systems on the market. We don't generally see them come to the door very often. If they do come to the door, we certainly entertain one of our experimental policy to find out if they're going to work. The problem with an aerobic system, you have to understand, is they function off of having to have power to them at all times. If you lose power, the aerobic system becomes anaerobic, turns the system upside down, if you will. Not figuratively, but it upsets the system. So the problem, again, aerobic systems, not a bad idea. But the drawback is that you have to have a constant power supply to keep that system functioning.
If the concern of a pit system would be contaminating the groundwaters, where you do have wells, what about in the case where you have a city water system through a whole subdivision and there are no wells? What's the problem?
The state's still not going to sign off on a direct contamination or direct injection into the groundwater. I mean, I'm just being very honest with you. They're not going to do that. And I mean, obviously, my concern, number one, is drinking water and wells, and that's the public health, obviously public health issue. But they're not going to sign off on anything that they see as a direct discharge without some kind of pretreatment. If you do the discharge, you just have to have some kind of pretreatment, i.e., the experimental systems and or the Advantech systems or the intimate sand filters, etc.
I have a question for Jeff White. I heard a rumor that there's some pending legislation requiring residential homes to be fire sprinklers.
Well, the rumor mill is somewhat realistic or reliable to that. The residential code, the IRC, will have that element most likely in it, 2011 probably. Now, the requirement has yet to be seen as how that will be, codified through California's code, version, the amendments, and everything else. So yes, there's a possibility that may be something that we do.
Last question, I promise.
I always say that.
No, the second half of what I asked earlier, but this is for Jeff. My SEBA and Focus buddies would harass me endlessly if I didn't ask you. There are alternative building systems ordinances in the northern counties, up by Eureka and some of those counties. have you ever looked at that or been directed to look at that?
Are you talking about green building?
No, the green building's coming, you know, that's gonna be part of that same code. No, I'm talking about alternative systems like a cob, pressed adobe. We already have straw bale, but I'm thinking about the more exotic experimental systems that people come up with, that they allow it because it's environmentally friendly, but you sign off on the property that this isn't a structural system, blah, blah, blah. I mean, to me, Calaveras is perfect for that, because half the county, we don't even have to do seismic analysis anymore. So have you ever talked about that, or looked at some of those?
We haven't seen a lot of energy in that direction. The green building, yes, that's certainly picking up a lot of steam, a lot of interest. And my point of view is I would embrace any fashion of realistic construction that provides for health and safety, and whatever methodology that can be quantified through the recognition of the codes in place. And more of this happens through a process by which time is told to tell that these things work, or the bugs are worked out. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the stress skin panel era that we had, which was basically a plywood insulation sandwich that was being used in every conceivable wrong way you could do, and a lot of these roofs they were being used on roofs and they're getting torn off and that sort of thing. So there's some bad, which is not what you're talking about, but it's an example of the types of almost like Brian calls experimental until it gets to be a proven stage. But yes, whatever makes sense and is formidable is something that we certainly embrace.
Yeah, I just asked because these people come in with stuff like this.
Well, yeah, I guess if you're shaking your head, I'd probably shake my head too.
No, you usually say go see Terry later.
Yeah. We know now. You're the right guy to send.
Has the driveway gradient fiasco been
well, I would say we could take it out of the fiasco category now and put it into a category where we have been able to come up with a list of mitigations that meet the same overall practical effect which 4290 was designed for in the first place. We had a considerable amount of interest in that in the past.
You're so understated.
And I don't think, I guess you'd have to be off planet not to realize that there was a lot of commotion going on locally here with that. And it did also initiate a visit from the state, the California Board of Forestry, which I rode around with them for an entire day. And we looked at everything from the good, bad, and the ugly as far as driveways were concerned. And basically, I was told that we would be hearing a variety of different types of things on different types of issues. I'm still waiting to hear a variety of different things on a different variety of issues. This was like almost 2 years ago, so whatever it takes for them to get there. But in the meantime, what we have done, and we've also, working with CDF, went through the state to show them that we had a list of mitigations. This is what we're proposing to meet the same overall practical effect. For example, wider driveways, distance from the access road to the building, putting in steps, curbs on downhill sides of the driveway, a bunch of different things, which are not codified because we don't want to get anchored in something that you have to do. It's like a menu of different aspects of this thing that you can pick and choose from, and the consultants bring that to us with to review as a way to make the driveway meet the intent of 4290. And in each case, we discuss this from my department with the local fire jurisdiction that is also involved, because that's part of their job as well. We get the final say. They get to have quite a bit of knowledge about how these driveways are going to be mitigated to meet what their serviceability is in their areas. So currently we have not had any driveway that has failed in any mitigation given to us by a consultant after understanding all the elements involved in trying to make the driveway work. We've had some that have come in that just clearly don't work. They can't even get to the consultant stage, but we see them anyway. No, it's not going to happen. So they have to go back and design something that has the mitigations in place that will allow us to construct those driveways. So we have, right now, I think the best time that we've been dealing with 4290 to implement that for the intent of what it was written for and accomplish a means by which we can satisfactorily meet compliance.
So I'm assuming now that driveways is under the authority of the building department?
That's correct. Driveways are under the authority of building department. However,
What's under the authority of the public works?
however,
The encroachment onto the public right-of-way is under public works.
and Public Works does grading and drainage. And if they have a plan that they see where a driveway meets the criteria, where they run the driveway, and the driveway only serves one parcel. If it serves more than one parcel, it's a road. And this is a new development type thing. They'll kick it over to us for the mitigation prospects of what that driveway is going to be before they can do their drainage and grading review. If there's retaining walls involved, then it's back to us for design with surcharges and all the other things. And I'll bring up one point that Terry visited yesterday, and we talked about retaining walls, and we have in the code what describes a retaining wall is from the footing to the top of the wall, actually at the bottom of the footing. So once it hits 4 feet, it needs design if it's retaining wall. If it's that's clearly in the code. So it was the interpretation was.
Along that vein, do you guys still use the standard practices manual?
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, these people would go out and get this engineered when they can just turn to page 37.
Well, we still require, the code still requires a wall with a surcharge on it to have design. And it doesn't matter how high the wall is. If it has a surcharge on it, that line between whatever the surcharge is to the base, the footing of the wall is 37 and a half degrees or whatever it is, then it has a surcharge on it.
So another question, when somebody comes down to get this building permit, is there something you can give to them so they don't bounce between you and Public Works? Because I get this complaint all the time. I go there, I go here, I go back, I come here, I go back, I come here. Is there some way you guys can make something where, here's a piece of paper that tells you exactly what you have to do with your driveway? This is a driveway, this is a road. Is it on the website?
We do have the mitigation stuff on the website.
It is on the website.
Yeah, and also we're going to have shortly, along with language on retaining walls, pick some illustrations that show what we were just talking about as far as retaining walls. So the idea is to give the applicant a fighting chance before they even come in to the department to have something that is submittable that can be submitted. There's oftentimes they don't have anything that resembles something that can be submitted, so we have to start somewhere. So with as much stuff as we can provide on the website, and there's a lot of stuff, to give a person, an applicant, assuming that they've never done this before, some chance. And we also would like to include a statement that is worth repeating. Is rather than ask the guy on the street what you need to submit or what you need in the way of permits, call us. They'll probably have a better answer, at least to get your submittal. Because we hear from time to time, well, so-and-so told me I could do this, or the guy over there on the van on the street thing usually gets them in trouble. So we would really like to discourage that unless you're into taking that chance. So.
I'm proposing we wrap this meeting up. Perhaps, Al, you can have the last question.
Okay, thank you very much. This is for the Department of Public Works. There is another issue that affects building homes and selling property that's not exactly the so-called legal access issue. This has to do with existing roads that are not up to county road department standards, but which do have buildable lots, and there could be thousands of these buildable lots, right now is no problem because nobody's building. But I wonder if we can look at this in an intelligent way and see if something can be done that would not ban building on those lots.
Currently, and it's part of the general plan, the existing general plan is and we're aware of it, and yes, it has actually slowed building in the county. We have people that are concerned about it whose projects have not proceeded because of the requirement to bring a road that serves their project up to a level of service C if it is currently under. And level of service is
Well, I just wanted to say one thing. It's not a buildable lot issue. It's actually a further development scenario issue.
Right.
In other words, if you have an existing lot on a substandard road, you can build whatever the code allows you to build. But if you have a big piece of land and you want to divide it into 30 lots, that's where it becomes a project subject to this policy.
Oh, I misunderstood.
Yeah.
I thought if you had a legal parcel, like for a single-family residence,
Right.
and you were on a substandard road,
No.
you would have to make that road unsubstandard.
No, you can build on a lot that is existing. The problem we have is people coming in wanting to
A subdivision.
do a parcel split. Even not just a subdivision, a parcel split.
Okay.
Something as simple as splitting off a portion of the lot for their mother, father, or son, or daughter. If the road is under level service C, they're required to bring it up to level service C, regardless of how small the project is. And that's, again, is codified in the general plan. We're hoping to look at that as part of the general plan update. There are a lot of things we need to look at, including the definition of level of service. Because a lot of the county road, the idea of level of service in other areas is based on the amount of traffic on the road. It doesn't really apply here. We're looking at geometric standards. We have old logging roads that are paved that people are trying to get a lot of access on, and it just doesn't work. So we have to come up with a level of service that works both for access and for the building community.
Would a split greater than a four-way split be the reasonable solution to that?
No. Well, I can't say no. We can't be arbitrary. What we decide is reasonable based on just the parcels that are being developed. It has to be also based on the road that's there. If we have a road that's a dirt road and someone's going to put in 10 lots or 4 lots, does that road have to be paved? Well, it depends how long the road is, the condition of the road. I mean, these are things we're going to have to look at in the general plan update and how we apply level of service. And that's going to be something that's going to go before the board. What is level of service for this county? How do we define it? And that's going to have to be in this general plan update.
Okay, I'd like to personally welcome all of you and thank you for coming today.